Hi everyone, Alan here with Discovering Buddhism. We're on Refuge, and this is the second class on the topic of refuge. So good to be with you. Hope you're well. Hope you've had a good week. And let's just begin our usual way by just doing 5 minutes of mindfulness of breath, breathing meditation to calm the mind and make us receptive to the teachings and practice. Right, get comfortable. Sitting, lying, on a cushion, on the floor, whatever's the best for you. Okay, we begin by bringing our attention inwards. Have a sense of letting go the outside busy world, the busy day we've just had. Now's the time to take care of our inner world, take care of our mind, develop our mind. And starting by resting the mind, not just for our own comfort and wellness, but also to help others. Once we control our mind, this is going to have a profound effect on those around us. Ultimately, we want to become perfect guides for other beings. Mahayana motivation. That means ourselves becoming enlightened. So now just checking up our physical body, adjusting, getting evenly balanced on the surface we're resting on, relaxing the shoulders, the neck and the head. And just beginning with the breath. Starting with the out breath, with each out breath, we just imagine we're physically letting go. Physically letting go any tension in our body, any holding on, our tightness, tension of the day. Also relaxing more deeply our mind with each out breath. Gradually giving all our focus, all our attention to the breath, the movement of the breath in the body. Something is always there, and now we're noticing it, just paying attention to it, allowing it to happen. Nothing to control. Just watch. Staying with the breath and just keeping an eye on whether we're still on the breath, monitoring. using introspection to just oversee what's happening. If we've noticed that we've been distracted, it's understandable, that's okay. Just relax, let go of that distraction, that thought, perhaps the noise. Patiently come back to the breath. Resting our mind on the breath. Thoughts may come and go, but we don't follow them. We just stay with the breath. The full flow of the in-breath and the full flow of the out-breath. Just one breath at a time. And just relax. So we'll begin by just, I hope you've got the notes which I sent out today. If you haven't, and you're new, hi Julia, good to see you there. If you just write something in the column at the side and give me your details, email address, and I can include you in the mailing list. No problem. So this interesting topic of refuge. Last week we looked at the meaning of refuge, and unusual word. Looked at the non-Buddhist idea of refuge. So we don't actually call it refuge, but it's actually things that we look for to give us comfort and safety in our daily life. Things that we look forward to, things that we feel are going to make us happy, cheer us up, and they're basically external things usually. External things. So it could be a nice movie, lovely meal, meeting up with friends, longer term, a good house, good career, good relationship. So all these are just part of everyday life. But what the Buddhist teachings say is that these things that we go to actually have defects. They're not going to provide anything that will actually solve the bigger problems and give us lasting relief from our problems. So this word refuge is, as Lama Yeshe says, we're taking refuge in those things all the time. It's just this tendency for our mind to always look beyond what we've got, always think there's something missing that we need, and once we've got that, all will be well. But if we look honestly at these things that we've been pursuing for so long, probably countless lives, they haven't really provided a great deal of satisfaction. Maybe short term, but nothing that we could say really ultimately satisfies us. So this is where the Buddhist idea of refuge comes in. So the Buddhist idea of refuge is that we can find these things that we can fulfill this need that we have to be whole, but it's not in external things, not in the things that we've been looking for or using without much success for so long. In fact, what it is, and I'll quote Lama Yeshe, so in Buddhist terms we call it Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, the three jewels. And Lama Yeshe very skillfully says that what each one is that the Buddha is a totally open mind, a state beyond confusion. The Dharma is the path of wisdom that leading to that state of mind. And the Sangha consists of those who are endowed with the wisdom and can help us along the way. So this is just such practical, down-to-earth explanation. So that cuts through a lot of the formalities. We need to sort of look at some of the more traditional meanings as well. And we just look briefly at the idea of, in the Theravadan tradition, a more literal definition of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. The Buddha is the traditional historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who lived 2,500 years ago. The Dharma is the teachings that he gave, and specifically the sutras that were given in Pali, basically showing us how to live an ethical life, avoiding negative actions, and as much as possible doing skillful actions. And the Sangha is ordained monks and nuns who have actually achieved realizations that can actually help us along the way. So that's a more narrow version of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. But in the Mahayana tradition, which is the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the one we're studying, the Buddha is not just this historical Buddha, it does include Shakyamuni Buddha, but all the Buddhas that have ever existed. So in the Mahayana tradition, there have been many Buddhas before the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and there's been many Buddhas coming to earth since Shakyamuni Buddha. Many beings have obtained Buddhahood since then. And of course, there are multiple universes and multiple Buddhas in multiple universes. So the Dharma, of course, includes the actual teachings given by the Buddha, the 3 turnings of the wheel, but it also includes the realizations that practicing Buddhists have. The Dharma, it's the path of wisdom, as Yalami Yeshe says, the teachings, and the implementation, the practicing of the teachings, putting them into practice, that provides the path to Buddhahood. It's the way forward. So we're going to look at that one more closely tonight. And the Sangha are ordained and non-ordained beings who have realizations of their Buddha's teachings, who have wisdom and compassion. So it could include our teachers, our gurus, ordained beings, and also friends, our fellow travelers who are also like-minded and interested in practicing the Buddhist path. And also in the Mahayana tradition, the formal definition of Sangha is 4 ordained people in the one place. So if there are 4 ordained people in a country, then it's said that there is Dharma in that country. So that would, of course, include Australia, 4 ordained people, or even Sydney, where we have more than 4 ordained people, fortunately. So, so then we looked at the idea of causal and relational, resultant. Refuge, the causal refuge are the things that will cause us to become enlightened. And the resultant refuge is our future goal, our goal of full enlightenment, full Buddhahood, and includes our potential for full Buddhahood. Our mind having the Buddha mind, having Buddha potential. So that's the story so far. And tonight we're going to just look more deeply at the Buddha Jewel of Refuge. Now, so just on the readings, on the reading list, of course, is the collection of readings from the Discovering Buddhism people, which is excellent. There are 4 extracts there from Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Then there's His Holiness's teachings in the book that I mentioned last week, Following in the Buddha's Footsteps. So those teachings, that's a very new book, and I've only just received it a few months ago. So they're excellent teachings, and they're quite advanced. And so the reason why they're in volume 5 or 4 of the series is that they are advanced. So excellent if you want to go deeper. But for people who want a more elementary approach, I'd recommend the readings and Yangtze Rinpoche's excellent book, Practicing the Path, which is also on the reading list. And also highly recommend is Venerable Dondrup's transcript of his teachings. You'll probably find that they're very readable. And he's such an excellent teacher. So those books are for the more introductory level, which is what I'm teaching at. So the notes are like a bits and pieces from His Holiness's teachings in that particular book, and some from Venerable Dondrup's transcript, and some from Yangtze Rinpoche's practicing the path book. So, looking more deeply at the definition of the Buddha jewel of refuge. So these extracts and teachings look at the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind. The qualities of the Buddha's body, speech. Remember, body, speech, and mind are how how we act. So the teachings on karma, our last module, we watch our actions, which includes actions of our body, what we say and what we think, our mind, body, speech, and mind, so that we, as much as possible, knowing how karma, cause and effect, works, is that those actions of body, speech, and mind that are positive will lead to positive outcomes, positive results, and negative actions of body, speech, and mind will lead to negative results. So the Buddha's qualities of body, speech, and mind are, of course, completely perfect. So some of these explanations and teachings, sometimes it feels like we're in a completely different realm, and we are, because the Buddha is beyond suffering. So let's look at first of all the features or characteristics of the Buddha's body. So one of the first things His Holiness has said is quite extraordinary. He says, if the Buddha does manifest so that ordinary people can see the Buddha, their bodies are not made of atoms. So how there's not a lot of explanation in his statement of this. I'm not sure whether he's referring to the historical Buddha, because of course the historical Buddha Shakyamuni did manifest as an ordinary being who obtained Buddhahood. So he was able to be seen even after he obtained Buddhahood as a human being. So it's up to interpretation whether that at that stage he was a normal human being with atoms, or whether the enlightenment experience made him transcend the normal composition of a human being. It's probably not all that important. But one thing that we need to look at just briefly is the what they call the 32 major marks of a Buddha and the 80 minor marks of a Buddha. So as Dondrup sort of briefly touches on this, he says, of course, we can't go through all 80 and 32, but so if we were able to see the Buddha as a Buddha, we would be able to see some of these signs, some of these specific signs. So just taking a few examples, the palms of the Buddha's hands, I'm reading from Dondrup's transcript, and on the soles of the Buddha's feet, there are what they call 1,000-spoke Dharma wheels, a Dharma Chakra. So if you've ever seen, say, statues, particularly in Thailand, where they have the Buddha lying down, they show, there's a wonderful sleeping or resting Buddha in Bangkok, very huge statue, and you can see these chakra wheels carved into the foot of the Buddha. These are Dharma Chakra wheels, and also carved into the hand of the Buddha. So they have these wheels on the soles of the feet and the hands. So each of these signs has a karmic cause. So that there's a whole set of teachings as to what positive karmic cause caused the Buddha to manifest these signs. So there's also the body is golden, the hair is blue, and the curls of the hair turn a particular direction. I can't quite remember whether it's clockwise or anti-clockwise. The ears are long, and so at the top, there's the Ushnishna. So you'll see this on Buddhist statues, which is like a crown or at the top of the head, like a small pinnacle at the top of the head. So that's actually a physical manifestation of flesh. So this is one of the signs of a Buddha. So as Dundrup says, the flesh of the Buddha is solid. Is, as His Holiness says, it's light. It's not made of atoms, and so there are various other signs. So the teeth are particularly perfect, and the speech of the Buddha is such that just every sound induces a feeling of bliss and happiness in those who hear it. So there is no poisonous. The Buddha has transcended things like anger, attachment, ignorance, and so forth. So Dondrup recommends you can read on page 34. There's Dondrup talks about some of these physical manifestations of a fully accomplished Buddha. But he says the main thing is to think about the cause, the cause of what the realizations, the perfect mind of Buddha that causes these manifestations. So the other thing is that we haven't been fortunate enough to actually see the historical Buddha. And because we're not all enlightened beings, even if the Buddha was there, we wouldn't actually see the person as a Buddha because of our obscurations. But as we can look at representations, we can look at Buddhist statues, and this is one of the great things. I mean, the unbelievable amount of holy sites in India. If you're ever fortunate enough to have the opportunity in the future, when the pandemic's over, to visit some holy sites and see some of the incredible Buddhist art in India, this can actually be very beneficial for the mind. We can see, but you don't have to go to India. There's some wonderful representations in Australia as well, and even just a small Buddha statue on the altar we can look at as a representation of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind. So, if we see these representations, tankas, pictures, and statues as representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, then they will have some power. They'll be able to affect our minds in a positive way. So because the Buddha pervades all existence, so once a Buddha achieves enlightenment, there's no going back. That person is enlightened, and they have the ability to manifest everywhere. And so if the devotee, student sincerely and earnestly requests the Buddha to come and sees the manifestation of the Buddha, the picture or the statue, as the method to transmit the Buddha's presence, then the Buddha will be there spontaneously. So the Buddha, as Yangtze Rinpoche says, just looking at the bottom of the notes on the page, he says, because of the Buddha is completely only there for us at all times, whether we are receptive and state of mind to receive the Buddha's blessing, the Buddha is giving the blessings anyway. So we don't have to take refuge for the Buddha to be giving us love, compassion, and wisdom. Okay, so that's the Buddha's body. If we're fortunate enough to see the Buddha's body. So the Buddha's speech. So this is the speech of the Buddha is blessed. So just the Buddha's way of transmitting the Dharma and helping other beings is to provide teachings, good teaching. So extraordinary thing about the Buddha's teachings are that all beings can understand in the way that will help them. So the Buddha is able to perceive the needs of each being. You know, all beings have different karmic dispositions, different states of mind, which all means different remedies. They're all got different illnesses that need different remedies. And Buddha, as the doctor, can actually see what's needed for each being, having this omniscient mind. That's omniscient mind seeing, being able to see all phenomena, including all minds, all physical phenomena, and all mental phenomena, or beings' minds instantly, and also the needs of each sentient being. So, so in the traditional teachings, when the Buddha teaches whatever language that person speaks, that person can understand, and then they also understand in a way that will benefit them and will make them happy. So I think I've mentioned probably in previous classes how just a more down-to-earth example is when His Holiness gave teachings. I think I mentioned this last week actually. Once when we had question and answer with His Holiness before we did a retreat in the 80s back in Dharamsala, when it was easier to have an audience with His Holiness. Each person, including the question I asked, each person asked a question. And when we compared notes after, we all realized that we were hearing something different to the answer. His Holiness was giving an answer that would actually benefit all of us, even though there was, a group of about 20 people there. So a slightly different or completely different answer was heard according to the same question. So this, to me, this was just an example of the Buddha being a Buddha mind, which I'm sure His Holiness had, being able to speak in a way that would benefit each being's needs, individual mental makeup. Also, so it's often called, the Buddhist speech is called traditionally the lion's roar. You might see that phrase in various texts and teaching. Lion's roar has this, it's defined as conquering extremist views. The lion's roar will subdue erroneous extreme views. And I think if you've been fortunate enough to watch some of the teachings that His Holiness has been given online, just last weekend there was some fantastic teaching to a group of Russian students. One thing that struck me was incredible the power of his teaching. So as soon as the question is asked, His Holiness gives an answer without any hesitation in a very even, gentle voice. And he can be quoting from incredible wide variety of sources in Buddhist texts without having to refer to notes. So it fits with the teachings on the Buddhist speech. How immediately he understands the question, he immediately knows the answer, and the answer that will benefit that person who's questioning. So if you read quite an interesting story by Dondrup, who says that once he was lucky enough to be in the audience when His Holiness was teaching Lam Rim, which is the basic Buddhist teaching, from 8 different Lam Rim texts at once. So 8 major texts of Lam Rim. So that would include Lama Tsongkhapa's and would include Prabhupada teachings. And how incredibly powerful, even just in just a few words, he was able to condense a few phrases and sentences and words, condense all the wisdom of those 8 texts into a completely coherent, understandable set of teachings. Similarly, with Lama Yeshe, I think he was an extremely good teacher. And for me, he was sort of, I think when I think about Refuge, probably it was Lama Yeshe that hooked my mind when he was teaching, when I went to his very first teaching in Chenrezig in the early 80s. So even though Lama Yeshe's English was quite basic and elementary, the power of his speech, it was almost poetic because they weren't complete sentences sometimes. But they were so, that made it more powerful, certainly for me, made it more powerful. So he was able to capture meanings that were beyond traditional black and white, perfect English, grammatical English. So that was, he was, and went straight to the heart of the students. So, so this body, the Buddha's speech, is incredibly profound. Looking at the mind, on the time. So this idea of omniscience, the Buddha can understand all phenomena, all external phenomena, so that all the physical world, and all non-physical phenomena, like all karma. Dondrup gives the example that, if a table, and he gives the example of the table that he's got in front of him, the Buddha would understand immediately that the table came from a tree, the tree that came from the seed that came from a previous tree. So all the chain of cause and effects, all the physical cause and effects, the Buddha would understand, as well as understanding all the mental karma of each individual, which is infinite, of course, the infinite chain of cause and effects from people's minds, which have no beginning. So this is the phrase where the Buddha knows all existence, E-X-I-S-T-E-N-T-S. And it's distinct. So the Buddha mind can understand the emptiness of phenomena, the wisdom realizing emptiness of all phenomena, as well as the conventional phenomena. Okay, so wisdom, the conventional and ultimate nature of all phenomena, the Buddha can understand at the same time. So the teachings say only a Buddha can do this, whereas highly realized beings that haven't quite reached Buddhahood will have the realization of emptiness, conventional and ultimate nature of things when they're meditating, but they don't have it when they're not meditating, when they're out of session. So you'll see there's quite a few lists if you read the texts about why the Buddha's mind is so reliable, why it's such a reliable mind of refuge. So this is coming from Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. Lama Tsongkhapa's teaching, the Buddha is fearless. So you'll hear that word often. His mind is fearless. So it's more than just having a sense of bravery, but it's based on the fact that the Buddha has nothing to hide, nothing to hold on to. He's not looking anything. He has no personal agenda or personal ego. So he although he's aware that he has this omniscient power, the idea to understand. Remember, omniscience is not omnipotence. It's not means that he's all powerful, can actually enlighten us. That's different. That's more the idea of the Christian idea of God. So it's knowledge and wisdom. So So the fearlessness comes from the fact that he has these qualities and he knows that he possesses the qualities, knows what the qualities, what omniscience can do, and all obscuration. So it's perfect mind. Buddhist mind is perfect mind. So he can offer protection. He has no fear. There's nothing for him to look after himself. There's nothing, no personal agenda. So he can provide perfect protection. So the other one is number 2, skillful in freeing others from danger. So having being able to see what's needed to help others, he can actually do is the power, excuse me, to free others from danger. This is what I've already just mentioned, the ability to see what's needed, excuse me. Sorry. Okay. So this is the power to see what's needed to help each sentient being and have the means to provide the help. And of course, with that, if somebody has, it means complete clairvoyance of the person's mind, but it's also coupled with compassion. So I've often thought, I don't really want people to read my mind because there's not much. There's a lot of stuff that's not really what I want to advertise. There's quite a lot of things not suitable for children or even for adults. So but if the person who has this omniscient power of clairvoyance, understanding people's mind, has compassion, complete compassion, there's no way that they'll use that power in any other way than to benefit and to help the person whose mind they can see. This is a great comfort to us ordinary beings who may feel vulnerable, being looked at when our mind's being looked at. So the other one, number 3, has compassion for all. That just mentioned that. So Yangtze Rinpoche has this very beautiful example of the moon reflecting in water. So the Buddha's wisdom and mind shining down like the moon, and the water is our mind, the lake. If the lake is still, the beams of light from the moon will be reflected perfectly on the mirror-like lake. But if the lake is stirred up, that's if our minds are disturbed. The beams of blessings coming from the Buddha are not going to be reflected because there's too much interference from our side. So that's that's wonderful example how the Buddha's compassion and blessings are always there, but we're not always able to receive them. The other excellent example, the sun. He says the sun is shining down, providing warmth and light equally. But if we don't go out and expose ourselves to the sun, the rays of the sun, then we're not going to feel the warmth. Okay. Similarly, with the blessings of the Buddha or the Buddha's blessings, I suppose the best word, the rays of wisdom coming down. And he works for all sentient beings, number 4. So that means they often use that example. So if the Buddha's sitting in meditation and one person on one side is massaging his body with beautiful oil, scented fragrant scents, and the other one is viciously cutting his flesh with hate. So one's being kind, one's being hateful. The attitude of the Buddhist mind will be equal to both. Okay, extraordinary. But the Buddhist mind has works equally compassionate for all. Okay, so but we need to be receptive. Our minds need to be open. So Lama Yeshe gives some wonderful examples in one of his extracts in the reading of the Buddha's compassion. So this is Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha's tales of the Buddha's lives, past lives, which are contained in different sutras and texts, show that he, even before he became a fully enlightened Shakyamuni Buddha, he was a compassionate, doing unbelievable acts of compassion. So if you ever read the Sutra of Golden Light, one of the texts that Lama Zopa recommends we should read, at least some bits of it from time to time. He says some bits every day would be very greatly beneficial. So there's a wonderful story of the Buddha giving up his body to a lioness who he finds in the jungle. This is in a previous life before he became Shakyamuni Buddha, and took great pity on the lioness because she's starving and couldn't feed the children, the cubs. So he actually gave up his body, decided to sacrifice his flesh so that the lioness could eat his flesh and feed the cubs, which he did. And there's another story of another previous life where he rescued fish that were exposed to in a lake and were dying because the water had been drained out by an evil man who wanted to kill the fish. And he did incredible deeds to save the fish. He built shade, stopped the sun, and then he brought lots of food, water with elephants in great skins so that he could fill up the river and save the fish's life. So these stories are to sort of help us understand the extraordinary deeds of the Buddha, even before he was a fully enlightened being. And interesting, Lama Yeshe in his teachings talks about, if you read in the readings, the compassion. It's not confined to Buddhists. He reminds us that Christians have incredible compassion. Many Christian saints, including, of course, Jesus, gave up his body on the cross, benefit of others. And he mentions Christian missionaries very particularly about how they go out to sacrifice their lives, their comfort, by serving in very difficult places, in difficult conditions where people need them, providing hospitals and other things. So next one, just looking why the Buddha jewel has become a reliable guide. Has become, His Holiness points out that, I've already made the point, I think, that the Buddha was like us at one stage, and even less. He was actually in the hell realms. He's been in all types of existences, a human realm, animal. And the point is that he worked on his mind to such an extent, and his Buddha nature was the basis of his work, and so that he could become a fully enlightened being. So this is a teaching for us. The Buddha wasn't always enlightened, and it's otherwise, the whole point of taking refuge is that we can make progress. We can use our Buddha nature, develop our positive qualities, and become enlightened ourselves, just like the Buddha. So we can follow in the same path. Okay, so if we're going to follow the path, which of course is vast, we need a perfect teacher. Okay? That's where the Sangha comes in. We need perfect teachings. That's the Dharma, and we need a perfect teacher to guide us. Okay, so I think we've covered that example of the sun and the moon by Yangtze Rinpoche. So we're going to do, at the end of, probably as soon as I finish my chit-chat, we're going to do a meditation on refuge, and it's the one that is in your transcript, Dondrat's transcript by Connie Miller on taking refuge. So you'll be able to sort of focus more on the qualities of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So just now quickly looking at the Dharma jewel of refuge. So this, as Lama Yeshe and His Holiness point out, is like the gateway. So it's although I'm teaching the traditional way to teach the three jewels is Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the actual sort of way in to the practice of Buddhism is through the Dharma. We actually need the teaching, the Dharma of the Buddhist teaching, to change our mind. We need the Buddha to give the teachings, but we need to hear the teachings and then practice the teaching. So this is so two ways of looking at the Dharma. One is that it's the conventional Dharma, which is the teachings themselves in the form of text. And of course, nowadays we've got much more than text. We've got multimedia, we've got teachings online, we've got e-books, we've got all these different mediums of teachings in languages that we understand. And so it's not just the Buddha's teachings. The Mahayana tradition also puts equal importance to commentaries on the teachings, commentaries on the sutras and the original Buddhist teachings. So Lama Tsongkhapa's, for example, revived the Buddhist teachings. Lama Tsongkhapa's, the whole Gelugpa sect is based on teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa, who appeared many years, trying to think of the exact date, was it 1200, around about 1200 AD. So so those teaching, the Mahayana tradition recognises that there are Buddhas existing other than the traditional Buddha, and there are great beings like Lama Tsongkhapa who became enlightened, giving teachings that we need to follow their teachings and their commentaries. And the ultimate Dharma jewel is our understanding of the teachings, okay? The realizations. So Lama Yeshe, again on the Dharma. So he points out that we don't have to follow the cultures of Asian Buddhist traditions. He talks about the culture of going to the temple every day, making offerings, and so on. He said that's not, taking refuge. So we need to do refuge rather than just do some sort of ritual and mouth words. And so recognizing our Buddha potential and our becoming our own therapist, as he calls it, not relying on our own wisdom. Okay, we need the Buddha's teachings to fire up that to as a bridge to realizing our own wisdom. And he said part of this is to have self-confidence, And the self-confidence can be generated by looking around at different human conditions. And so this is why, appreciating our human life and also where we are, and that we've got contact with the Dharma, interest in the Dharma. So quote to quote him, he says, we can see that when we look around, we feel that I'm not too bad. I've got some hope. I'm not hopeless. I can build on what I've got and make progress. Build on my wisdom, inner wisdom. And he also points that it's not just when we're in trouble that we need to sort of take refuge and turn to the Buddhist teachings, Pt2. He says also if we're having incredible success and pleasure, we also need to take that at a distance as well, and think that we know that this pleasure will not last forever, and that I hope that my satisfaction doesn't depend on this external pleasure. This too will pass. Right? The suffering will pass, and the pleasures too pass. So again, you're not relying on the good experiences or the bad experiences. So just a little bit about the Four Noble Truths. So remember, the Dharma is that there were three turnings of the wheel by the historical Buddha. This is not all the Dharma, but the historical Dharma was presented by the Shakyamuni Buddha during his lifetime, and the three main set of teachings were what they call the three turnings of the wheel. And the first turning of the wheel at Bodh Gaya, no, first turning of the wheel, was it Sarnath? Was it Sarnath or was it Rajgir? Forgotten. So anyway, the first turning of the wheel, the teachings were the Four Noble Truths. The teaching that true suffering, that suffering exists, true causes, that suffering doesn't just happen, it actually comes from causes, cause and effect. Third noble truth, that we can actually end suffering. If we end the causes, we can end the suffering. And the path leading to that cessation of suffering is the Dharma. That's the path, that's the teaching, Dharma wisdom. So the Dharma jewel of refuge is basically in the third and fourth noble truth. So I've got at the end there various quotes, which you can just have a look at. I've just extracted some quotes from the readings about the Dharma jewel, or it's actually not just the Dharma jewel, but it's on refuge as well. Interesting quote that recognizing our own Buddha potential, Lama Yeshe says, we also we can see Buddha potential in other beings, so it helps us develop compassion, love, equanimity to others by recognizing our own inner strength, taking refuge in our own Buddha nature, Buddha potential. Okay, so just over the page, there's a few things. This is on the last page. Just things to think about. So there's not really any answers or anything to sort of remember. So these are just a few questions to see how the jewels of Buddhist speech and mind can relate to our own way of thinking. So perhaps you haven't even thought about refuge. You might be just very new to Buddhism. Perhaps you've done some teachings. So the first question is asking, how do we develop confidence in the validity of Buddha's teachings? Let's see, the Dharma. So all this, if there has been any sort of interest in when we've come across Buddhism, what is it? Is it the teaching? Maybe the teacher? Is it something, some sort of quality of the, perhaps the historical Buddha story? So for me, I think the Dharma, although the Dharma is said to be the entrance to Buddhism, to becoming a Buddhist by the teachings, which is very true. For me, I think it was there was very few copies of Buddhist teachings in English in the early 80s. Like probably just a handful, really. Bodhisattva Arya Chara, the Bodhisattva Way of Life was one of them. But so I was going to the centre, it was one centre, the Lioness Centre in Sydney. I was going to the Adia bookshop, which used to sell, the only shop that sold anything resembling a Buddhist content or Buddhist books. Tibetan Book of Living and Dying was one of the few Buddhist books I had. But it was very, mainly it was listening to teachings at the Buddhist Centre, the Lioness Centre. And then, but actually the trigger was, I think, going to a teaching by Lama Yeshe in Chenrezig, and just seeing the power of this person who just seemed to be a superhuman being. It's like no other human being I'd ever met. And I remember thinking at the time, this person is like the best bits of all the good bits of everyone I've ever met, plus a lot more. It's just exuding goodness and joy, and spreading it as well. Just being with him was an incredibly uplifting experience. So it was really through the teacher, I guess, either the Buddha or through the Sangha, the power of the teacher, that I thought, right, there must be something in this. Whatever he's doing, I want to know. I want to know about it. I want some of what he's got. So that's sort of that's because of the historical time. So nowadays there aren't so many teachers in person, but there's lots and lots of Dharma, lots and lots of Dharma. Like we do have multimedia. We've got teachers in a virtual form, and we've been told by His Holiness that if he gives a blessing over the internet, and if he gives a transmission, then it's just as good as if you're there in person, depending on your the reception of it in your mind, the person who's receiving it. So, so there's a lot more available now with technology, and also with different media formats. So these are just questions. What seems to be there, and also what part of the teaching hits home to you? Is there one part that's different or that stands out? So just think. Of course, this may not have. It may be too early to actually look back. But if I look back, I think the particular thing that I really liked was, first of all, teachings on karma. I thought that was really very powerful. And if you read Dondrup's transcripts, he says he thinks that's the most important part of all the Buddhist teachings, is the teachings on karma, because it affects everything we do now, every second, body, speech, and mind, what we're thinking, doing, saying. If we have this awareness of karma, cause and effect, then it's going to affect our behaviour, benefit our behaviour by watching our body, speech, and mind, mindfulness. So the other thing for me was the teachings on emptiness. So having just grown up in a fairly low-key Christian background, went to a Christian church, Methodist church, Christian school, Methodist school, but but wasn't particularly interested. And parents, fortunately, didn't insist or push any particular religious line. Or the teaching on emptiness was like no other teachings before. The teachings on compassion fitted very well with Christian teaching, but the teachings on emptiness, also at the time, the early 80s, there's a lot of interest in quantum physics, and as a kind of amateur scientist, never studied at university, but I've always loved science, there was lots of books coming out about quantum physics and how there's no concrete atom, there's no essence in the material world. They can't actually find a building block. The atom used to be seen as like the building block of the physical world, but by the 80s, the quantum physics found there was always something else to break down. There wasn't any permanent particle, partless particle. So this also fitted in with the idea of dependent arising, everything being related to something else, nothing existing from its own side. So in quantum physics, some of the experience the result that you produce will depend on the mind of the person, what the person intends to achieve with that test. Very interesting phenomenon. So even though this idea in science has still got a long way to go, the teachings in Buddhism on wisdom realizing emptiness, and the dependent arising nature of all phenomena, it's incredible. So that definitely for me, that was like very much something that interested me. And I guess, I was taking refuge. I saw something really deep and worthwhile. Still, at the beginning stages, of course, but that was something that hooked my interest. So I've got a little example there about medicine. Often wondered about why we trust Western medicine, which I do to some extent, of course. I had a hip replacement a few years ago, and looking back, I decided that I trusted the science. There was no, the doctor was, I investigated the doctor, of course, perfectly qualified. The science of hip replacement is really well established. So just thinking why I just took, not refuge in the traditional sense, but it's the idea of trusting a body of knowledge and trusting a particular discipline, Western medicine. So for the hip replacement, I had no doubt once I sort of investigated what hip replacements involved. Thought there's a whole body of knowledge and science here that's extremely well settled. So I subjected my body to the operation, the knife, and luckily it was successful. So just using that as an example of the idea of taking refuge in a particular set of facts and teachings. So Western medicine as against alternative medicine. Some people would prefer alternative medicine. And what's that? Is that based on evidence-based science, or is it based on recommendations from friends or feelings, something more intuitive? Or perhaps it's just based on experience, something that's worked, perhaps no scientific basis for it, something that worked. So these are things just to help us understand the idea of refuge. Perhaps we feel a particular teacher has changed something in our continuum very positively. That could be, it may not be a whole lot of rational facts, but of course we still need to study, as His Holiness always stressing that we need to study, learn, and meditate. Okay? We can't just rely on a feeling, an intuition. Teacher felt good, so follow that. So that could be the trigger or the beginning, but then we need to follow it up with study and practice. So let's now, in the last 20 minutes or so, just have a look at this meditation practice. I've mentioned where it is in the transcript. It's basically Refuge Meditation. And what we do is we begin with where we left off in our meditation last week, appreciating our human life, how extraordinary that situation is that we are born human. But then we just go to the next step, and we think of the possibilities after this life. Firstly, that we have to end this life at some stage, we have to leave the body, and think of the different realms that we could end up in, particularly the possibility of the lower realm, suffering of the lower realms. So we may not end up with a comfortable human body. It could be an animal rebirth, of rebirth in unfortunate realms, is what His Holiness describes. These are the hell realms where incredible suffering exists. So we contemplate this in the practice to generate some wholesome fear of what our mind could be in store unless we do something about our mind. And then so we generate that's the very beginning, what we call the lower level practitioner, he's motivated by fear of what could happen in the next life, to practice, take refuge, and take care of his mind in this life. So the medium level practitioner can see that even if we attain a human rebirth, we're still in samsaric existence. We're still in uncontrolled birth and death. We're still in this cycle of suffering, basically. And so we need to get out completely. We need to generate the wish to be fully liberated forever from all samsara, all suffering. That's our second level of practice. And then the last one is realizing that we're not alone. There's millions and millions, countless other beings who also are facing an possible unfavorable rebirth, suffering in the future. So we need to think of them. They're countless in number, we're one, and generate the wish to become enlightened for their benefit, wish to end our suffering so that we can help them in their suffering. So these three steps, you'll notice if you do the meditation at home, you can use Connie's guidance, Connie's summary of the meditation. And then we look at what we need. We need bodies, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Why they're good, flawless, perfect refuge for our mind. And we just look at each of those qualities, like we've just done in the teaching so far. And we can also think of that we need a doctor, we're a patient, and we need perfect doctor, perfect understanding of the illness. That's the Buddha. We need medicine from the doctor. That's the Dharma. How to apply and take the medicine, teachings on that. And we need Sangha to guide us on how to apply the medicine and support us spiritually in all ways. So these guides, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, are perfect, and they're worth taking refuge in. So it's just to affirm our faith in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Okay, get comfortable and we'll do the practice. Just coming into the breath for a few moments to calm the mind, settle our body, speech, and mind. So we begin our meditation on taking refuge in the three jewels. First of all, contemplating our fortunate rebirth, appreciating our human life that we have now. We have this body with a human brain, can reason, can think, can learn, can understand. We're born in a place that is favourable, calm. Physically, our needs are met with food, clothing, shelter. We have freedom of religion, respect for human rights. Most important, we have the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha available. We have centres that offer the teachings from perfectly qualified teachers. And we have the time to pursue our interest in the Dharma and interest from previous lives in the teachings of the Buddha, in transforming our minds. These conditions, perfect as they are, could end at any moment. This human life will end. It's certain. The time it will end is uncertain. The only thing that will help is our state of mind, our mental practices we've done during this life, past life. Thinking that what comes after this life is not necessarily a favourable human life or a rebirth in the upper realms, thinking of the possibilities that we end up in a suffering realm, lower realms, animal realms, hell realms, and experiencing great suffering. We don't want that, feeling that fear, generating wholesome fear, knowing that our actions leave karmic seeds on our mind stream. To avoid unfavourable rebirth, we need to sow positive karmic seeds on our mind stream. And to do that, we need to take refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha to achieve a favourable rebirth next life. This is the lower level of motivation. That's middle level of motivation is not only do we want favourable rebirth next life, but we, even in rebirth, we still suffer in cyclic existence, even a favourable rebirth. So we want liberation from all uncontrolled rebirth, liberation completely of all suffering. So we need to renounce the develop renunciation of this pleasures of this life, devote ourselves to practice, to become a liberated being. So this is the second level of motivation, taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And then the Mahayana Refuge is that we see that there are countless other beings suffering like us. We're one, they're countless, so we need to motivate to help them become liberated. Mahayana motivation to become liberated ourselves so that we can lead others to the state of liberation, the highest motivation. And the only thing that can liberate us and enlighten us is taking refuge in the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Contemplating now the Buddha jewel. Why is the Buddha jewel able to lead us to enlightenment? Just contemplating the characteristics of the Buddha enlightened mind is free of all fears, has complete understanding of all phenomena and all beings, omniscient mind, and also has perfect power to see what is needed to help each sentient being's mind. He also has the power to guide each sentient being out of suffering to enlightenment, because he has compassion, equal compassion to all beings, in all realms. And he will act spontaneously to help without even our requesting. And whether we've helped or harmed, he will help. So we can see the Buddha as the doctor, the perfect doctor, able to diagnose and give remedies to the illness, our illness of delusions and karma. Looking at the Dharma jewel, the Dharma that is taught by the Buddha, is the medicine. The medicine of Dharma is the path of cessation of all our suffering forever. The complete path available now in this country, the perfect medicine. And the Sangha, taking refuge in the Sangha, spiritual community, spiritual guide. Those Sangha can be seen as the nurses who help us administer the medicine, the teachings, the Dharma. Our teachers guiding us. So as the patient, we need to be receptive, have faith based on reason, understanding of the three jewels of refuge, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So only thinking that only these three perfect Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha jewels can liberate us from samsara. Only someone who is free can free another. Only someone who is perfect can lead another to perfection. Think of these qualities of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha and generate faith as much as possible. faith in the Buddha Dharma Sangha with 3 jewels. So in conclusion, remember that the best way of taking refuge is to be mindful of our actions, body, speech and mind, observing our karma, abandoning as much as possible non-virtuous action, as much as possible practicing virtue. And doing this not just for our own benefit, to becoming an enlightened being so that we can lead others out of suffering to enlightenment. So let's dedicate, due to the merits generated from this meditation, may I proceed along the path, eventually obtain full enlightenment in this or future lives, and lead all other beings, without exception, to enlightenment. And just reading Lama Zopa's special dedication for the pandemic. However many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed from all sickness. May all sickness, without exception, for all transmigrating beings, never occur again. Dedicating to that. Okay, so that's the teaching for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it, got something out of it. Look forward to seeing you next week. So have a good week. Next week I'll send you questions, go with the package. And stay well. See you next time.